o'clock, and thank you all for joining us for our webinar. We are ISBM, the Institute for the Study of Business Markets, and we are so glad that you've decided to spend an hour with us. We have a really great speaker today. Jerry Katz and Kristen are from AMS, and they are going to talk to us about whether or not there really is some way of automating these things in voice of the customer. So we're excited to hear about this. ISBM was founded in 1982 as a collection of academics from institutions around the world, as well as premier B2B companies. And the purpose was to advance and direct the science of B2B marketing. At the time, there was no area that was doing research. And even today, this is the point at where all roads lead to get to B2B research. So we have nearly 40 member firms today still, and we have 29 academic fellows, and I'll show you pictures of those later. So today we have got Jerry and Kristen from Applied Marketing Science, and they're going to talk to you. And there's a nice picture of me, and all of us have it looking good with our hair there, but you're not going to see any live shots from us today. Go to the next one. Here's how to work with us. So we're in Zoom, and if you've used Zoom, that's great. If you haven't, you'll learn a little bit more about Zoom today. So if you scroll down, put your mouse over the bottom part of your screen, you should find a toolbar. And in that toolbar, you'll see that you can click on something that looks like a folder with a Q, and that will open up the Q&A screen. And so during this presentation, you'll be on mute, all of you that are watching, but you can type questions to us, and I'll be monitoring those questions as they come in, and I will field them to Jerry and Kristen at the end of the presentation. So as you think of them, feel free to type them in. If you have a problem or a question about the function of things that are happening, feel free to type there as well. That's where Lori and I will be watching things. So if you need to communicate with us, just feel free to open that Q&A bar and talk to us there. Okay, Lori. There's always a question of how do I get access to this? And of course you can. So everyone that has signed up for this webinar, whether or not you're a member or not, can see this replay for about 30 days. And you'll go see that at our website, isbm.com/library. And typically in that library, you'll see the last 3 or 4 webinars that have been out. You'll see our town halls that we have been running that you can listen to again and see. And you'll see a few presentations from our last members meeting when February we had been able to get together. If you'd like to be able to see more content or learn more, as a member, you have access to everything we have in our library under B2B Pulse. And if you're having a problem getting in, then contact Lori or I. But if you're not a member and you'd like to know more about that, please do contact us and we'll help you understand how you can join ISBM and get access to all of our curated knowledge. This is our membership team. Again, that good looking picture of me, and then Rand is there. You would have met him if you're talking about being a member or helping you with member services, and Becky William manages our curriculum. And then Stefan and Lori and Gary Lillian are all on the academic side, making sure the research gets done. And of course, Lori supports everything. She does that all. And then Ralph Oliva, who will join us for our next town hall and be our moderator for it, is our director emeritus from the other side. We have ISBM fellows. Here are some really amazing names. So Bob Cooper just did a webinar for us. If you did not see Bob Cooper's webinar and you are doing product development, you need to go watch that. That was awesome. Abby, Gary Lillian. We have a bunch of member firms, as I said, about 40. Here's their logos, and you can join that group if you haven't. And then here's some upcoming events that you might want to get on your calendar. So today we're doing this one, which is, hey, is there such a thing as artificial intelligence? I think we all want to know that answer. We have 2 more, three town halls that are coming. One is this Thursday, and then the next couple of weeks, one is specifically on the 22nd on managing your crisis communications. So that should be very useful to everyone. And then there's a webinar in May, and we're filling out the May years. We have courses. In fact, we're running a course. We just did one this morning, Pricing in a Crisis, that Joanne Smith is teaching. It was awesome. We'll probably run that one again because right now you cannot but do something well in pricing during this crisis. Please don't do the wrong thing. We have several others that you can look at there, and I won't go through them all, but we've been moving all of our content that we deliver online. Our partners are still working on hopefully having them in person. So they may not have already moved it to online, but we continue to monitor that. So if you'd like to see any of those, let's go. And Lori is going to move us over. She's keeping me moving. Thank you. And Kristen is going to take this over from here. So let me introduce Kristen and Jerry, and they're going to tell you about AMS and about Voice of the Customer.
Okay, Just switching over here, we'll get started in 1 second. We just have to go to
technology.
All right, everything working, I think. All right, so I'm Jerry Katz, and here with my colleague, Kristen Corrigan. We are both with a company called Applied Marketing Science. We're located in the Boston area. Those of you who are longtime members probably know that our primary expertise, or let's say what we are best known for, is our expertise in voice of the customer market research. But we're now a 31-year-old firm. We've got 35 employees, and we do all kinds of market research, and about 80% of it is for business-to-business customers. So I've been associated with ISBM now for, I think, over 15 years, and I teach the course on voice of the customer research. Now, for our discussion today, I chose this kind of glib title of, come on, is there really such a thing as artificial intelligence or this machine learning stuff, really? And I'm expressing here what was my own skepticism. And frankly, that I hear, to this day, I still hear a lot of skepticism about this topic. Let me tell you where I come from on this topic. I learned computing as a college undergraduate in the late 1960s. And the world in which I learned computing was a world long before we had not just PCs, but before we even had dumb terminals. Computers sat in these big air-conditioned rooms. They were only what we called mainframes. And there was a good deal of naivete about what computers really could or couldn't do. This really is a photo of a computer room from the 50s or 60s, probably early 60s. And the only thing that made it different from a college version of this was men are wearing ties. That would not have been true in the world where I learned it. But at any rate, as a sophomore, I was learning languages such as machine language and assembler and Fortran. Those of you who are old enough might know what these are to this day. I just heard that the government is looking for COBOL programmers now because some of the systems at Social Security were written in COBOL. But at any rate, I think to the naive, the computer was just known as some kind of a genius. They didn't really know what it was, what it did, how it worked. Now, once you started to take a computer course, though, you realize that the computer is really just a giant calculator, and it could do two things really well. You could deal with numbers, and it could deal with mathematical logic. So you learned in programming if, then, else statements. If this is true, then go here, and if it's not true, go someplace else. But the big problem in computer science way back then was, how do we get computers to deal with text? How do we get it to, think about syntax and language and all of that stuff? And that has been the focus of a lot of computer scientists ever since. That kind of morphed into the field today that we call artificial intelligence or machine learning. And we know computers can compute, but can they think like a human being? Can they deal with language? And that's always been the problem. Now, history has a way of repeating itself. Where voice of the customer came from was a doctoral dissertation of ISBM fellow Abby Griffin when she was at MIT Sloan School, and Professor John Hauser was her doctoral dissertation advisor. And her dissertation became this paper that really created the field and kind of coined the term voice of the customer. And voice of the customer deals with gathering, understanding, organizing, and prioritizing customer needs. So what happened in the last few years was Hauser had another graduate student, who I'll refer to in a few minutes, who wanted to deal with this question of artificial intelligence. Can we teach a computer to extract needs from textual material? So we came at it thinking about the voice of the customer application. You'll see that it went well beyond that, but let me just show you where we were coming from. Okay, The first phase of a VOC process or a VOC study has 4 pieces. We interview customers. Griffin and Hauser showed that it's best to record and transcribe those interviews. And then human beings have to read and extract needs from transcripts of the interviews. And that last piece there was always the most tedious and laborious part of the process. Even though I will argue to the ends of the earth, it's worth a lot of pain. It's a lot of pain. And so Hauser's graduate student began to use that as the test case in which he was going to try to come up with an algorithm to teach computers to recognize needs in textual material. So I'll come to the end here. Can we use these techniques to automate this task? Happily, the answer is yes. And in fact, what he found was that it goes well beyond needs extraction and transcripts. It can really be used on almost any kind of textual material that's out there. And it's good not just at identifying needs, but also drawing out rich insights from textual material. Now, in those early days, though, they were dealing with consumer products and needs that came out of social discussions, social media. And you'll see that we've really evolved quite a bit beyond that as well. Now, why is this important at all? Well, research budgets are always small and sometimes getting smaller, and that's particularly true for B2B companies. It's getting harder. You have to dig a lot deeper to come up with something, an insight new under the sun. And there's always the issue of not just expense, but time consuming. So this was viewed from the start as an important problem to work on and to try to solve. Now, let's think about what's out there. Most companies may not realize it, but they're sitting on a gold mine of insight. Here are some of the statistics. There are 3 billion active social media users on the earth. They spend an average of 2 hours a day doing social media. There are over 100,000 online forums, and increasingly those are B2B forums, not just dog owners and young moms. And there are over 60 million people in the US who have posted reviews about various products and services. And it's not just restaurants now, it really is often B2B products. In addition, most B2B companies have very deep customer service lines. There are over 265 billion calls to customer service every year now. And the average person makes 11 customer service interactions per year. So there's a lot of stuff out there, and most of it is free or nearly free. So we've gone from a world in which there might not have been enough data now to a world where we really have too much data. And the challenge is, how do you make sense of all of this? And how do you weave it into something that's usable? Okay, let's talk about what was actually accomplished here. What this grad student was able to show is that machine learning made it possible to more quickly find insights that matter, faster and better. Now, I learned in business school that there are 3 ways to win in new products. It's better, faster, cheaper, and in most cases, you need 2 out of 3 to be successful here. So, was this new algorithm that he came up with, did it qualify? Well, definitely. The better is it often overcomes human bias in reading these things. Faster, yeah, the computer can do what we take a week or 2 to do in a couple of minutes. And again, cheaper, well, user-generated content is virtually free. But there were even some other benefits he found. First of all, we're either working with smaller sample sizes if we're reading transcript, or we're looking at a small sample of user-generated content. Well, the computer now can deal with as much as you put in there within reason. So it's much more complete. The machine does the heavy lifting, so it's easier. And most people are posting content immediately after something happens. So it's very much moment of truth. It's really very much transaction oriented. So when this grad student started to work, and his name is Artem Tomashenko, when he started working on this in 2017, we, in a sense, at Applied Marketing Science became his laboratory, and we supplied content and helped with analysis as he tried different versions of his algorithm. If you're interested in the technical part of this, the paper was published a little over a year ago in the journal Marketing Science, and it's called Identifying Customer Needs from User-Generated Content. Tomashenko and Hauser draw three conclusions here. He found that the insights identified were absolutely comparable in both number and quality to human beings reading the transcripts. That in many ways, the algorithm found more interesting insights and ones that didn't emerge in many cases from a human being reading a transcript. And finally, they found things that were infrequently mentioned because the computer was able to deal with not just, say, 20 or 30 interviews, but with literally thousands and thousands of comments that were posted in various places. Now, how does it actually work? What do you have to go through to do one of these tests? Well, there's sort of 5 parts to it. The first thing you need to do is figure out what sources you're going to mine and extract content from. And I'll talk about the various things we've tried in the next slide. But the first thing you just have to do is point toward, okay, here's where we're going to look for content. The second phase is what we call training the algorithm. Tomashenko and Hauser use the words informative versus not informative. So you have to show the algorithm examples of comments that do represent important needs or insights, and some others that aren't informative, that don't look like important needs or insights. Once you start that, the machine is able to extend itself and learn from those early examples there. The third part is running the machine. It's usually quite quick, and it can go through these thousands and thousands of lines of text. And you get output, which is simply a lengthy list of comments that the algorithm believes are needs or insights. Analysts then compile those in the same way we would in a normal voice of the customer study, and sort of organize them into groups, reword them into proper syntax because human beings often don't speak in nice, clean syntax. And that's the process here. And as Kristen goes through some of the examples, she'll show you what we did in all 5 of these here. Now, what kinds of material have we worked on here? Well, under the heading of user-generated content, we have product reviews, online discussion forums, online communities, and various kinds of blogs. So far as proprietary data, which is more often the case with B2B companies, most companies either record, transcribe, or take notes from call center interactions, and they try to catalog that. That's been great material. Online chat data. And finally, we find a lot of our clients are doing Net Promoter Score surveys or satisfaction surveys with their customers all the time, and many of these have open-ended questions. And we found that open-ended survey data, of which there are usually thousands and thousands of comments, has been another great source for B2B companies. What are the conditions? What do we actually need to make it work? Well, you need to start with something on the order of at least 2,000 sentences of textual material. When we talk about a sentence, let's say they have to be substantive, at least 7 words per entry. So we can't do much with 2-word phrases or grunts or things like that. Again, it needs to be text-based. And a question that researchers at MIT are now working on is, can this be extended to deal with pictures or charts or other kinds of graphics? We have some interesting stuff going on, but where we are right now is only dealing with text-based data. And then it has to have informative content, meaning product attributes, customer needs, various problems, opinions, solutions. That kind of discussion is what works best. Some examples since Tomaszenko and Hauser began that we have done as a company, uncovering needs obviously was the roots, but then identifying adjacencies, discovering insights about various competitors, looking for market trends. As I said before, Net Promoter Score, program enhancement, being able to make sense out of the open-ended questions, developing claims, and really as a general complement to almost all kinds of market research that we do at AMS. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kristen to take you through a couple of interesting cases. Let me hand this over to her.
Okay,
Okay,
great. Thank
Kristen,
you
it's
so
all
much,
yours.
Jerry. Let me just put it into presentation view here. As Jerry said, I'm going to walk you through a few case studies because I think this is a really great way to understand how this machine learning methodology works in practice. And there are three that I'm going to walk you through today. The first is a consumer example about blenders, and then we have a B2B example and a medical example. So our first case study here is on blenders. This is a consumer product. And you may be thinking, well, of course machine learning would work on a product like this. It's so simple. Well, that's actually not the case. In our exploration of this category, there's actually a lot of different needs surrounding this product. Of course, there are the functional needs relating to the use of the blender, but there are also emotional and experiential and health needs related to blenders around following certain diet regimens, or even the way a blender makes your kitchen appear to others when they enter your home. So a lot of nuanced needs here. This was actually a study that we did as part of the paper we partnered with Artem Tomaszenko on that Jerry mentioned previously. And our objective here was to see if we could identify the complete set of customer wants and needs through using online product reviews alone. And we wanted to see if we could replicate what a traditional research would give us by using just product reviews. And we also wanted to see that if we used the machine on the product reviews, would we do better than if we just went in and took a random sampling of various reviews on various websites? Okay, so that's what we sought out to do. We followed the process which Jerry reviewed earlier. We identified the sources to mine and extract content. And so for this example, we looked at blender reviews on various brands and models on websites like Target, Bed Bath & Beyond, Walmart.com. We mined that content. In some cases, we manually cut and paste the reviews from the website. That's a pretty laborious process. There are tools that make this process easier that automate it. So we use that on some sites which allow it. We then train the machine learning algorithm to understand what content is informative and what content is uninformative. And by this, I mean, we're training the algorithm how to recognize what a customer need or insight is. I always like to clarify here that we're not biasing the machine at this point. It's still very neutral. All we're telling the machine is what is informative and what is not. So for example, in a product review, if someone said, the blender did a great job, in terms of VOC, that is not informative in telling us what customers need. Yes, it shows sentiment, but it doesn't show why the blender is so great. After we train the algorithm, the next step is to run the machine, and that takes mere minutes to do. And the machine outputs a number of phrases, usually on the order of 2,000 or so, for which we do our analysis. And the idea here is that if we read the 2,000 phrases output by the machine, we will understand all of the unique needs and insights from the 18,000 that we originally fed into it, okay? And from there, we do our analysis as human researchers and analysts to come up with those 97 unique insights that you see there at the bottom, and to also come up with the qualitative story, much like you would do in traditional research. So I also want to point out here that you'll see that we're really blending the best of human analytics and machine analytics in this process. I really like it because we're having us as human researchers focus on the value add. You know, in my mind, that's digging and identifying what sources we can find good information. So step 1, and then step 2, training the algorithm. And then in step 5, really doing the analysis, doing the data synthesis, and putting together the story. Still very much a need for human analysis and expertise in that stage. So what did we find? Well, our analysis led us to insights around 34 topic areas. And you'll see, as I said in the beginning, these topic areas really range from everything to safety, speed, portability, power, versatility. Then you'll see some emotions there like fun, trust, very wide array of needs. And this was great that we saw so many different needs and so much detail. Here are 3 of the 97 insights identified. So these are only 3, but I show this slide because it does a good job of breaking down how we analyze the output of the machine. So let's look on the right side of the screen here at this topic of blending quality. The informative content here is what the machine outputs after we run it. So in this example, the informative content would be the customer verbatim. This unit has no problem with the fruit or the almonds, but will struggle with those flax seeds. I know this need well from making smoothies in my own kitchen. The insight there that we as analysts glean from that is able to blend anything I put in it, regardless of the texture, e.g. fruit, nuts, and seeds. So you'll see that the machine outputs informative content or verbatims from the reviews, and we as analysts form the needs or insights. As we mentioned earlier in the webinar, a real benefit of machine learning is its ability to identify insights overlooked by a random sampling of reviews, and also often overlooked using traditional research methods. And so this is an experiment that we did as part of this study. We said, what if we took a random sampling of reviews from Bed Bath & Beyond, Walmart, Target, and did our VOC analysis? And then what if we used the machine to put through those 18,000 insights? Would the machine do a better job? And the answer was yes. The machine uncovered these 4 detailed insights that the random sample did not. So the insights are: assured I never have to worry about the tightness of the blade on my blender, something that didn't come up in the random sample. Assured my blender won't ruin the surface it's sitting on, e.g. it won't ruin my table. My blender stays put when I'm using it, i.e. doesn't wobble or walk across the counter. And then the last one, easy to turn off the blender, i.e. the on-off switch doesn't get stuck or become hard to push. Now, all of these nuanced needs did not surface by using just a random sample of reviews. It was only through using the machine and the algorithm that we were able to uncover these needles in the haystack. And you know, when you think about innovation and product development, that's often what we're looking for, right? We hear the same needs over and over again from our customers, but those nuanced, infrequently mentioned needs might be areas that we explore further for innovation. Another piece that's been quite powerful for our clients is the idea of sentiment, right? So we started talking about this before, but understand when customers leave reviews, particularly when they go online, they're very passionate. They're often in the moment of truth, which is great when you're thinking about VOC, because that's exactly what we want. We want that emotion, either positive or negative. And so what we can overlay on top of our machine learning analysis is, in addition to the needs, we can look at how people are talking about the needs. Are they talking about them with a positive sentiment, or are they talking about it with a negative sentiment? And when they're doing that, what brands are they referencing? And so here's a spider chart. This is a great way to showcase sentiment on 5 key product attributes related to blenders in this case. And you'll see that when you look at Ninja, customers were talking about Ninja very positively in regards to aesthetics, blades, and blending quality. But when they talked about Hamilton Beach, they were winning out on cleanliness and durability, where Ninja was falling short. So when we think about product development and we think about actionability from something like a machine learning using online content, overlaying sentiment is a great way to do that and to understand how customers are talking about your product. And it's also a great way to keep a pulse on things over time. So we talk about refreshing this type of data. You know, obviously there'll be new product reviews that come out, and the sentiment of how people are talking about your brands or competitive brands may very well change over time. Okay, let's go into our next case study here. It's a B2B example. This is a real client of AMS's, and I always love talking about this example. It's snowplows. And everybody always says before I start this case, what online information is available about snowplows? And to be honest, we said that at the start of this as well, but you'd be surprised. We found many informative forums with lots of customer verbatims for this topic. So our client's objective here for this case was to identify customer needs and insights related to snowplows and spreaders, and they wanted to do this to inform their product development and their marketing positioning moving forward, okay? The process, this should look very similar to the one that we just walked through for blenders, was to identify sources to mine and extract content. And in this case, we didn't use primarily product review sites. Rather, we used forums where operators of this equipment and purchasers of this equipment would talk. We trained the algorithm, much like we did before, to identify informative and uninformative content. In other words, train it to know what a need was. We ran the machine. The machine outputted about 2,000 phrases, such that if my team were to read those 2,000 phrases, they would understand all of the unique VOC that exists within that 21,000 sentences. And we came up with 117 unique insights and were able to create a qualitative story and strategy based on those insights. Really exciting, because any of you on the line that are familiar with VOC research know that anywhere between 80 and about 140 and about 150 needs is typical of a VOC study, particularly in an industrial or B2B category like this, which we do a lot of. And the 117 insights was great for us to see, because it told us the machine was doing a good job and we were able to get that robust and detailed level of information. The process worked extremely well, and in the words of our client, you know, he was very enthusiastic around the fact that we were able to get that detailed and truly comprehensive database of 117 needs. He was also impressed that it covered numerous facets of the snow removal equipment industry. So not only the needs around the product itself, but also needs around the experience of purchasing, maintaining, repairing, etc. And the last piece here is that our client remarked that he was encouraged by the fact this is a repeatable process and something that can be effectively scaled to dive into additional research questions or areas of interest. And so by this, I mean, you can, based on the first run of the machine, retrain the algorithm to focus more in depth on certain questions that may have arisen after the preliminary scan, where we're not really biasing the machine, we're just saying insight or not. So you can dig deeper that way. You can also add additional data sources in subsequent runs to say, okay, are there any additional needs, say, in these survey open ends or in this forum data, or now that the forum has been up for 6 additional months. And it's quicker to do that because we've already somewhat trained the machine beforehand. We're just adding the additional data to the mix. So here are 3 of the insights we identified as part of this engagement. The insights are related to lights, sidewalks, and spreader. So for lights, you'll see the informative content. The reason I don't angle it is because I hate having the one side sticking out so far, and it will block the headlight at some angles. So the insight here, very informative for our client, I might add. Ability to maintain full visibility at all times, even while my plow is angled, i.e. it will not block the headlights, okay? We had informative content about sidewalks. So the S70 is not the easiest to turn from one 48-inch walk to another 48-inch walk. That is perpendicular. And so the insight there that we came from that, a sidewalk plow that is easy to turn, i.e. from one perpendicular sidewalk to another. And then lastly, on the spreader, the top box keeps my tools safe and dry. Do they still have plastic wheels? Good spreader, but wheels keep cracking. Assured the wheels on my spreader are durable and will not crack. Okay, so you'll see the level of detail that those verbatims contain within them and how we translate those into insights or needs. Now, here are 4 of the insights that surprised our client. You know, I always say at the start of any research engagement, whether it be traditional research, VOC, or machine learning, if you know your industry, anywhere between 60 to 80% of what you hear is probably not going to be all that surprising to you. I think there's benefits to have it all in one place and understand it in the way that your customer is articulating it to you. But between 60 and 80% will not be that surprising. It's the 20 to 40% that is new or a new way of thinking about things that are really exciting. And so these are 4 examples of that for this example. The first one here is actually directly impacted a recent product development for our client. And that was the insight I just talked about, the ability to maintain full visibility at all time, even when the plow is angled. So this actually directly influenced their design of the next generation plow and headlight placement and has been very well received in its initial introduction to the market. The second is a sidewalk plow that is easy to turn. So we talked about this on the previous slide as well. That also impacted their next generation plow and has been well received. And again, these are things that they had not heard in the past or not heard from their traditional research they had previously done. Assured I had de-icing material for all different types of road, gravel, paving, etc. That's something they could look into. And then sand that will not strip away paint when applied, parking lines, etc. So just an example of 4 insights that the machine was able to unearth that they really hadn't heard about before or heard about in this way. To wrap up here, you know, our client said it was a mix of known and new results, as I just talked about. The known results increased their confidence in the validity of the machine learning process, right? I know it works because I've been producing snowplows and spreaders for so many years. It came up with these needs that I know the market has, therefore I know the machine is doing its job. The unknown results increase the confidence in the value of the process, right? So I know this is worth doing because it's uncovering things that are surprising and novel to me. It was cost and time effective. So you're all familiar, as Jerry was talking about before, with the costs associated and the time associated with traditional research. We would argue that's very valuable, but especially now, people don't always have the budget or the time to do that, and we're getting increased pressure to have results more quickly. So the cost is reasonable relative to those traditional methods as well as the time. I mean, I think these studies I've done in as quickly as 2 weeks. You know, when you look at identifying the sources and doing the analysis on the back end. So very quick compared to traditional methods. The last piece here is the research results were objective. Now, when we're doing research ourselves, either as corporate researchers or as an agency like AMS, we do go in with some hypotheses. We do go in with some preconceived notion. The machine doesn't do that. It's a machine. So you know that the results are objectives. It's really unearthing every corner of the data and looking for those unique insights. And that is something that, you know, they really did appreciate. Before we open it up to questions, I will cover our last case study that we did for a medical device manufacturer. So for this particular engagement, we were looking for patient needs and insights related to glucose monitors, the monitors that diabetics use to check their blood sugar levels. And this research was also to be used to inform product development and marketing. So we were after VOC for glucose monitors. So there's a lot of information online regarding glucose monitors, and we mined it all. So we went and we solicited for customer verbatims from forums and blog posts. We used over 1,000 of these. We visited e-commerce sites and were able to extract over 5,000 reviews. We went to social media sites as well, various Facebook groups, and we got over 500 reviews and posts from those sites. So a lot of information available for those glucose monitors online, a lot of patient conversation. Here are some examples of the needs and articulations we uncovered as part of this. If you look over to the right here, the interface and features block here, the user-generated content or the verbatim is both work in the same way and are easy to use. The GE100 has a bit of an advantage if the tester has lost some dexterity with their fingers. Its lancets and test strips are a little larger and easier to handle than the test strips and lancets of the Ultra 2. So the need there is a glucose monitor and accessories that are easy to use even for those with limited dexterity. So you'll see there are other need categories around connectivity, assured my stored readings will be private and secure, that's huge, and accuracy. External conditions do not affect the accuracy of my reading, i.e. humidity, especially if you're traveling with these monitors. You want to make sure that they're working. And so, you know, as we said before, these are verbatims from customers that we mined from those sources. They're at the moment of truth. It's at the moment where the patient is going online and voicing a frustration in the blog or praising a product in a review when they have a positive experience. What we did from here is a little bit different than the last case study, and this is partially why I wanted to share with you today. Oftentimes when we end a VOC with machine learning, we get the question from our clients, well, can the machine tell me how critical or how important each need is to my customers? You know, which one we should work on first in terms of innovation? And the answer is not yet. Well, we can look at things like sentiment or frequency of mention. We don't have a pure measure of importance from the machine alone. And so our solution to that is to take the output from the machine learning activity and put it in a more traditional quantitative online survey. And that's exactly what we did here. So we surveyed respondents who have type 1 or type 2 diabetes, who have owned or used a glucose monitor in the past 3 months, and they use it at least once a week. And they use various brands. You know, pretty basic sample for these glucose monitor users. We had about 300 completes. And what we had these customers do was rate the insights from the machine learning study on 2 critical dimensions. One is, how important is this need or insight to you as you're using glucose monitors? And they would go through the list of 30 or so rolled up insights. And the second is, how well is the brand that you're using, we'd fill in the brand that they're using, performing on meeting this need? And so by understanding that, what we can do is create a market opportunity map based on the machine learning insights. And you'll see here that we're plotting importance on the Y and performance on the X-axis. There are a few different categories here that I'll just take you through very quickly. The upper right here are minimum requirements. And so these are needs where customers are telling us it's very important, right? You must meet this need. And you're performing very well at meeting it already. And so what that tells us is that we need to do these things in order to compete in the market. But perhaps this isn't the best area to explore for innovation because we're already performing well. In the upper left quadrant, on the other hand, are focus areas. So these are needs where customers are saying, hey, this is something that's very important to me, and I'm not that satisfied in terms of how you or the market are meeting that need. And that tells us that this could be an area potentially to innovate and add value for customers, right? The lower right are overemphasized. So these are needs that are lower in importance, higher in performance. And we call this category overemphasized because perhaps we can mine resources to potentially focus on other areas because these aren't the most important areas for customers. And then the last quadrant are hidden opportunities. This is an interesting area. These are needs where customers are saying, not that important to me, and no one's really doing that good of a job of meeting this need for me, right? And what we find here is that oftentimes customers will give manufacturers a pass on these because nobody is doing it, and so they can't imagine it could be done. An example of this I always like to talk about is the iPhone, and the fact that I have so many pictures of my children now on my phone wherever I go, thousands and thousands. If you would have asked me years ago the importance of having every picture that I've taken in the past year in the palm of my hand or in my purse, I would have said, it's not really that important to me. And I would have said, no one's really doing a good job of doing that because they weren't. But now, show me an iPhone that doesn't have the best camera and the storage to hold every single picture, and I'm not buying it. So we find that sometimes when a technical solution emerges that meets one of those needs that are potentially hidden opportunities, it can be a disruptor, and it can move needs to focus areas and eventually, minimum requirements. So how did the glucose study come out? Well, you'll see here that we rolled up our machine learning insights. Remember, we had hundreds of needs into about 30 sort of secondary higher level categories. And it's a little hard to read here. We'll circulate the presentation after. But you'll see that a number of interesting needs fall in that upper left area of focus areas. One that I found quite interesting was this idea that I don't have to feel the puncture from the lancet. This was really interesting, and I think something that often, manufacturers brush off, like, of course you're gonna have to prick your finger if you're taking your glucose measurement, right? But what if we could innovate that? And what if we could make it somehow less painful to get that measurement? The other piece was not having to waste test strips, right? And so this says something in terms of how manufacturers might innovate regarding their disposables. A manufacturer that stands behind all products, regardless of where it's purchased, and external conditions don't affect the accuracy of my glucose monitor reading. So this need coming out of, hey, understanding that I'm going to be traveling with this monitor, I need it to withstand all of those elements. Hidden opportunities, this was also very telling here in the study. You'll see some of the information needs and the privacy and security needs falling there. Nobody really quite there yet or doing a good job, but in terms of what's coming down the line, you bet that it may be, seamlessly syncing these types of results to a smartphone or to an app, and corresponding to that, having it be safe and secure so people don't have to worry about their personal information on their phone, And then the other thing down there is the idea of using the glucose monitor to track other conditions as well. So very telling, a good way to add some actionability to the machine learning by doing a quick survey of customers based on the output to understand where the opportunities are. The last slide before questions, I'd like to show this because I think it's interesting, and we're doing some more research on this ourselves at AMS, but if you've done a quantitative survey before, you've probably noticed that it's very difficult, especially when you're using a 10-point scale, to have respondents use the entire scale. There are various strategies you can use to try and combat that, but it still remains a problem. So here you'll see in blue there, we were asking overall satisfaction with the various manufacturers. You'll see everyone's in the range of an 8, with Freestyle Abbott being highest. When we compare that to what we had in machine learning in terms of sentiment, it's the opposite. And so when people are going online in the moment of truth to talk, right? Not in a survey environment, but in the moment of truth, you'll see that Abbott actually has the lowest sentiment. And Bayer, who had the lower satisfaction score, actually has the highest sentiment. And so I show this to say that I think, as organizations, it's interesting to look at things like sentiment and performance to understand, how our brand might be talked about online and in the public, and how people may answer in surveys, and how that might differ, and how that may change our strategy. So with that, I think we have a little bit of time here. I'll turn it over to Jerry to wrap up, and then we'll turn it over to our hosts to take any questions.
Okay, well, thanks, Kristen. As it says here, we're still looking for interesting cases, even though we've done dozens of them now. I think the word experiment there is probably not accurate. We're well beyond experimentation at this point. We do charge for it, although it's really not terribly expensive to do this. So if you have an interesting case, please contact us. If you'd like to read more about it, we put a URL there for you. And just in general, our website is ams-insights.com. And Kristen and my contact information as well. So with that, let's open it to questions.
Great. So we had a few questions come in. This is Lynn. So I'm just going to give you some of the questions. The first, I think, came on early as we were looking at you guys creating these insights. The question is, so now we're thinking about doing this. How long does it take to train the algorithm? Like, what is your FTE usage? How many people do we have to put on this for how long to get the algorithm to be trained?
That's a really good question. And I often get as I said, a lot of questions about the training of the algorithm. Typically what we're doing at AMS is we're taking a subset or a sample of the extracted content, and we're training hundreds of lines of text, binary, simple yes or no, is it informative or uninformative? So the whole process usually takes about a half a day to a day, where AMS does the initial coding typically, and then we have a client counterpart review the coding to just make sure they're aligned with what we're calling an insight and what we're not.
And what kind of person is the person from the client side that you have review this?
It's normally just the person that commissioned the resource. Or the research, excuse me. It's not a highly technical task. It's more just qualitatively looking at the results and saying, or a subset of the results and saying, is this informative or is it not? So typically on my end, it would be one of my analysts doing this, and on the client end, the person who commissioned the research.
So somebody in marketing probably.
Yeah, exactly, or product.
Product development, okay. And what is the minimum kind of data set that you need in order to have something valid?
Yeah, I think, Jerry, you covered that on your slides. Was it about 2,000 phrases we like to see at a minimum?
Yeah, minimum of 2,000, which really isn't all that much.
No.
We're usually able to get well in excess of 10,000.
And we've done it with upwards of 1 million.
Okay, great. And are you seeing now that you've been doing this for a while that people are using this instead of voice of the customer experience? Do you see it taking the place of those face-to-face conversations?
Yeah, I can answer that, and Jerry, chime in too. It depends. So for some clients where time and budget are an issue, and there's a wealth of information online, yes, it has replaced traditional voice of the customer qualitative research for them. I would say for more clients, it has acted as a complement.
Mm-hmm.
So by way of example, I recently had a client in the data communication space. They have so many open-ended survey responses from their customer satisfaction surveys, or just the surveys that they're giving to their B2B and B2C clients weekly. And they hadn't gone through those open ends for VOC. And so what we did is we had a phase 0 to our traditional VOC, where we used the machine to understand all of the verbatims that they were already sitting on, all of the things that the customers were already saying, so we could conduct smarter VOC when we actually got on the phone or in person with customers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we weren't asking about the needs that we already uncovered from their surveys, but we were using the VOC interviews to ask about what the topic areas that we hadn't covered. And then the last piece I'll add too is this idea of the latent or unspoken needs. That's not something machine learning can really get. And so if you're thinking about an ethnographic approach to VOC, that's something that still needs to happen. Jerry, would you add to that?
The only thing I would add, I thought you said it perfectly, Kristen, is B2B are the cases where it's been more of a complement rather than a replacement. In business to consumer, usually the content is deeper and richer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think of this as, you know, when you want to do a VOC study, you have to have a good person or persons that are skilled to have that interaction. And in this case, you're sitting on a mine of data that you haven't actually looked at. As a person who types a lot of verbatims into surveys that she's sent in email and always feeling like nobody's actually going to read these, I'm feeling a lot more encouraged that if I type all this out, something, even if it's a computer, will look at the words that I've said and make some sense of it, because I feel like that most of the companies don't look at those verbatims. They've just been
right. Exactly.
Them. Yeah, it's a shame, because I just know that what I've told them is very valuable. I don't know why they're listening. Yeah. So I'll just make one more request. Is there anybody else that wants to add questions? This was fascinating. I have like a million things that I want you to do the study on. Probably.
It's been really interesting for us too. We've really enjoyed being on the cutting edge of this. And,
yeah. I want to introduce you to the Tesla people, because I don't think they're listening to me there either. Anyway, I'm sure there's data in there. So I just welcome anybody who's still on the line. If you think of a question after we've cut off, feel free to contact Kristen or Jerry directly, or you can contact us at ISBM and we'll put you back together with them. And this will be recorded, and in a few minutes or so will be available, and we'll send it to you as well as the slides that they provided with us. So I thank you both again. This has been fascinating, and what an amazing step forward in using all of this data that consumers have been giving us and we've been ignoring. So thank you so much for this. It's great.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us, Laura.
All right, and I'll remind folks as you sign off that this Thursday we have our next town hall that's going to be hosted by Ralph Oliva, and Jerry will be taking questions at that one, as well as Jeff Bennett on strategy. And so I hope you'll join us for that. Thanks again. See you all.